Hey everybody, this is Josh McKinney, and I just want to welcome you to episode 182 of the I Suck at Jiu Jitsu show. So today we're going to talk about something really exciting. Actually, for the next 2 weeks, we're going to talk about something really exciting, and that is everything I know about being a coach. We're going to look at this is called the Ultimate Guide to Coaching BJJ. We just did the Ultimate Guide to Starting BJJ last week, and so I thought these kind of all-encompassing ultimate guides would be really a fun place before we kind of get to episode 200 of the show. I've got a little tweaks that we're going to make to the intro and just some different things we're going to do fun on the show now that the studio is built out and it is finished. If you guys are watching at home, I'll make sure to hit you with all of the cool shots that you may be able to see at the studio right now. And so, those are exciting. But biggest thing that we are going to do today is just look at some helpful tips for coaches. We're going to look at what it means to be a jiu-jitsu coach and how you can be a better jiu-jitsu coach. And we also, of course, are looking at certain pitfalls that a lot of coaches fall into. And we're going to finish this two-parter off with a bunch of basically frequently asked questions of jiu-jitsu coaches that I give my opinion on. And I think you guys will really, really enjoy this episode. And that's pretty much, oh no, that's not all I have. I want to make sure to let you guys know that next Tuesday will be the first of our interview series coming back. It doesn't really have a name. I guess they're just still I Suck at Jiu Jitsu show episodes right now, but I need to differentiate these solo episodes from the interviews that we're going to be doing. But I have an interview with Chris Paynes coming out this Tuesday. You guys are really going to like it too. It's just about coaching. It's just, Chris and I, anytime we talk jiu-jitsu, it's about a million different things. We're always bouncing around, but I think you guys will really like that episode and it'll really be helpful. And I thought it would be better to release it because it mainly is about coaching, to release it in between the two parts of this episode. So today's part 1 will come out. It's on a Thursday. Next Thursday, part 2 will come out. But then in between on Tuesday, we're going to release an interview with Chris Paynes. And like I said, it's a great one. You guys are going to love it. I think that is all I have for you guys. Besides, make sure if you haven't given me that 5-star review, that you give me that 5-star review, man. I've been begging for it. The amount of 5-star reviews we're getting is still increasing. It's still crazy how many people have given us 5-star reviews, but you could always use one more, man. If you're getting any enjoyment out of this free content, be sure to hit me with that 5-star review. And without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into this episode. The Ultimate Guide to Coaching Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So for me, this is going to be everything that I know and I understand when it comes to actually coaching individuals, actually getting them to where they want to be. But not only that, really, we're going to focus on what a coach's role is and how they can better themselves, how they can see the kind of gaps in their knowledge, and they can use their team to fill those gaps. I wouldn't really get into so many different things. I would anticipate that this episode is going to be a 2-parter. Normally, I record my intros and outros first and then actually record the content of the episode. But this one, with how much stuff I'm going to cover and how much good stuff I think I'm going to get through, I just think it would probably make the most sense to go long enough on this episode to make it a 2-parter, which we haven't done in a long time. And so I thought a good place to start, always definition is a lot of times one of the main places we start on this show anytime we're trying to do anything of value. And that is going to be the same today. We're going to look at what is a coach's role in jiu-jitsu, because jiu-jitsu is kind of weird. When you really think about it, most of the time when you go to a jiu-jitsu coach, they are a business owner first. You go to them and you sign up at their gym and you pay them monthly, and that is what makes them their coach. And so anytime you have that, you're going to have some blind spots in the role, right? Because some coaches are going to see those dollar signs, and that is going to be what they focus on. They're going to build their team, they're going to build their curriculum around how do I keep more money in my gym? How do I make more money in my gym? How do I work less in my gym? And these aren't evil questions for a coach to ask. If you're listening as a student and you're like, yeah, a coach's job should only be to make students good and they shouldn't worry about money. Anytime you have a skill that you worked really hard on and you finally get to a point where you feel comfortable trying to monetize it, anytime you feel comfortable trying to make money on it, what's very normal, what can happen, and what I see happen to a lot of different people is you feel like it's wrong. You're not supposed to. I've never made money on jiu-jitsu before, so I should not now. And I think just like everything that we're going to talk about today, I really think it is a matter of finding the right balance. Because with that business owner mentality, with that business owner idea, it really is an important part of being a jiu-jitsu coach. Because even if I have like 4 really phenomenal athletes on my mats, if they have nobody to train with because I don't do my role as a business owner, or if they have no place to train because I didn't do my role as a business owner and the gym closed down, we just didn't have money to pay rent or something like that, that is me not fulfilling my business owner role at the gym. And it's a very important role, unless, of course, you just have a bunch of money and you're able to just kind of, fund all of your jiu-jitsu journey, all of your jiu-jitsu stuff as a coach without even having to worry about what you'd have to worry about with your gym. Anyway, let's look at the 3 main roles that a coach has. And I didn't have business owner in this. I just thought I would give you a little blurb about what it is like running a jiu-jitsu business. We've done jiu-jitsu business ownership, jiu-jitsu gym growth episodes before. I will make sure to link those. In this episode, we'll look at, I have 2 different ones that I'll make sure to link. But if that's what you're looking for this episode, this really won't be it. This episode is really built on how to get your students better, why you should focus on getting your students better. It's more focused on the non-business side of the coach's role. But like I said, I wanted to start out making sure we were clear that you still have to have balance. You still have to have some focus on gym growth and financial growth. Or what happens to most coaches is they start to fade out. They're like, man, this is a lot of work. I put in so much of myself into this and I don't make anything out of it, or I just make very, very little out of it. And so I think it's going to be important to just make sure that you have that balance. But then we'll look at the 3 main roles of a jiu-jitsu coach, and we're going to talk about those. The first one is what everybody understands, and I think this is what everybody thinks of, even coaches think of themselves as, when it comes to being a jiu-jitsu coach. It is the instructor. Okay, so that means that like the person who in most jiu-jitsu schools breakdowns techniques, breakdowns positions, breakdowns ideas, and explains it to the whole gym. And so if for most people, they think that that is what jiu-jitsu coaching is. And there's a big problem there. And kind of the reason I think that the conceptual approach to teaching is becoming so exciting to other people, and it's really growing. And I love to, in my own head, believe that I'm one of the reasons, one of the people that's helping it grow. Maybe that's not true at all, but I like to believe that. I like to think that. And as conceptual jiu-jitsu grows and more people start to teach in that way, what's going to start happening, or what is happening in jiu-jitsu, is people are realizing that technique is not everything, that technique development is not everything, that learning new techniques is not everything. And I know you have it painted on your wall somewhere, you have a tattoo of it, you have the quote, technique conquers all. And I think that that's a little bit cheap. The reason I think that that is a little bit cheap is because technique is not the only thing that there is. There are parts of jiu-jitsu that are not broken down into techniques. For instance, I've done episodes on blitzing and I've done episodes on pacing. We did episodes on strategy when it comes to an actual round or an actual match. We even did an episode recently on how to beat people that are better than you. Right? And the reason that we can say things like that is because generally the measuring stick in jiu-jitsu is how much technique you know and can perform. And even for some people, it's just how much technique you know. That's how good you are at jiu-jitsu. But being able to implement technique is incredibly important, right? And implement it in the right order, which is not a technique in itself. That's more of your strategy, right? So what people are starting to realize as instructors by teaching more conceptually, by teaching a load of technique all at once, they're starting to realize, wait, technique isn't the only thing. There are other things that I should be doing, or there are other things that I should be teaching. Or more importantly, what I noticed when I was on this journey, and still am, there are other things that coaches talk about that aren't necessarily jiu-jitsu technique. There are things that are incredibly helpful that coaches do and say that aren't necessarily jiu-jitsu technique. I'll give you an example. I was just at Pans. We were watching one of the greatest comebacks of all time. Adam Warzinski is fighting in the finals against Felipe Andrew of Pans, and he's down on points, and he ends up sweeping and passing to Mount in like the last 90 seconds. And so it's like a 9-point score there. And then it's the score is tied. And as soon as he lands in Mount, his coach, Lucas Leite, starts yelling, and we can kind of see on the camera from behind him, he starts yelling for the cross collar choke. 90 seconds left in the match. And I don't think that he had any intention of finishing the cross collar choke, right? But he knew, because of his strategy, that if he could convince his guy to go for the cross collar choke, which he eventually did, that he would get an advantage, and that advantage would then win the match for him. And that's what he ended up doing, and it really worked. It made a lot of sense. It was a really good game plan. But even though a cross collar choke is a technique, it wasn't a technical decision. It was a strategic decision. It was, hey, if you go cross collar choke, worst case scenarios, he bridge and rolls you off of him. You're in closed guard. He gets no score, and you have a cross collar choke still. Hey, if you go cross collar choke, you get this advantage, right? And so as a coach, he wasn't just seeing the jiu-jitsu technique. Of course, the tool that he used was a cross collar choke. But as a coach, he was seeing the whole picture. He was seeing the whole strategy. And that brings me to the next two roles of a coach. We looked at the instructor. What about the coaches that are motivators? I feel like that is something for me that I am best at. There are a lot of things that I'm pretty good at. But when I look at what to me separates me from other coaches, one, my ability to see skills, see positive attributes of other people, and I do a really good job of either stealing those attributes, stealing those ideas, or figuring out a way to get that person on my team in whatever sense, whether that means we just train together and we're on separate teams. So just get that person and take their positive attributes and use them to mine and my team's advantage, right? And then the second thing that I'm really good at is convincing people that they can do things that maybe they probably can't. And, those are two skills. Like when I look at, as an instructor, I think I'm a very good instructor, but I'm not even the head instructor at my gym. My dad is. My dad is who kind of decides on what we're going to do curriculum-wise. He teaches, to me, the main technical classes at our gym. For me, I teach skill development classes. I don't really teach. I don't really instruct a whole lot unless it's an individual conversation, unless somebody has something and they say, hey, I'm struggling with passing this specific guard. That's when I will be an instructor. But most of the time, I'm giving really, really big ideas, and I'm saying, okay, this is footwork from guard is really important. These are some ways to do it. This is why you do it. Now let's play designated winner, and we will figure out how to do it better, right? And so I think that just making sure that we are, just making sure that we kind of know our roles as coaches is so important. Let's look at the third role, kind of talked about the motivator, but the third role of a coach is a mentor. And I think that a lot of people, this resonates with them when they hear this, like, yeah, my coach, that is what they are to me. And we're going to look at some of the biggest things of growing all of those, becoming a better instructor, becoming a better motivator, becoming a better mentor. But before we go into that, we should look at what the best coaches do. The best coaches understand their strengths and weaknesses. And of course, we are always trying to grow. We're always trying to become a better instructor, a better motivator, and a better mentor for our students, or at least good coaches are. But there are times that you just can't fill that gap, especially you can't fill that gap the same way someone else from your team could. And this is when I really think a lot of coaches can screw up. Is they think of anyone who is going in and teaching at their gym, they think of it as a threat, right? They don't want their younger guys, they don't want their purple belts and brown belts teaching because, I don't know if they ever verbalize it like this, but I really think that the thought process is, what if they decided to run their own gym and then people liked them better? That's just going to be part of it, man. That's going to be part of letting people grow. But I think if you do a good job with your students, and I could totally be wrong about this. This could all blow up in my face. I could re-record this episode 10 years from now and be like, yeah, bad call. Don't empower your students to do their own thing. Just try to keep them under your thumb as long as you can. But I just don't think that's the way. I think that making sure that you are empowering your students and giving them opportunities to coach, that's going to not only help, it's going to take time off you to focus on your motivation, your mentorship, whatever else, other parts of that coach's lens that you need to be looking through. But what is going to happen is you are going to start to notice things outside of the instruction that are necessary, that you could be helping and you could be growing. And that's, for me, a big reason I don't teach every class at my gym, besides the fact that I just hate my guys so freaking much, is that I have a lot of people that are pretty darn close when it comes to the instructor skill is me. I have so many people, especially if you start to look at specific things. If I go, okay, well, I could teach wrestling to my guys, or I could have Eric Hebner teach wrestling to my guys, well, it probably makes more sense to have Eric Hebner do it. Right? He wrestled his whole life. I did not. He's also a black belt in Jiu Jitsu, right? And so when you look at that, his perspective is probably going to be a little bit better than mine. It's probably going to be a little more helpful than mine. And I think just as a coach, knowing that it can be like that not only could you have somebody teach class, but you could have somebody teach class and you could hang out and actually get to take the class. To me, as much as I don't get to do that as much as I would like to me, it's one of the most fun things when I get to just come into my gym and actually enjoy it like my students get to enjoy it. And so let's just look at a quick tip on each of these things. If you say, man, I'm a really good motivator, terrible mentor, and a terrible instructor, or I'm great at two of these things, but I'm really bad at one. So we're just going to look at a quick tip on all of those things, and then we're going to move on to some true ideas on how to become a better coach. And so the first tip is, what if I suck as an instructor? What if I'm trying to become a better instructor and I just don't understand? I think the best place, and this is assuming that you are someone who can do jiu-jitsu, someone that can perform moves that if somebody else walked into the gym at a belt lower than you, you're probably going to be fine handling yourself. But especially if somebody walked in the gym with no belt, that you're going to be able to beat them using jiu-jitsu, right? If you can do that, I think the best way to become a better instructor is to stop focusing on what other instructors who you put in your head are better than you, what they say and what they do. So often I will go to a class and I'll go, man, this dude is literally trying to repeat word for word something that John Danaher said, okay? And if this is you, that's okay. I understand that you are trying. That is the most important thing, is that you are trying. But let me explain to you why that to me isn't the best idea. Why maybe that you could do better by explaining what you do versus trying to explain what John Danaher does. The reason I say that is because if we were at a seminar and John Danaher was talking and he explained it a certain way and somebody asked a follow-up question, he understands what he's sharing. He understands his curriculum enough that he could respond with a few sentences and it would close a lot of gaps for all of us. Because you are only watching an instructional and you're not taking something that you actually know and actually understand, when it gets questioned and even when you come up with your own questions, what tends to happen is you tend to get frustrated. You tend to be like, oh man, I'm not, I don't know this content. I literally don't know what is being told to me or what's being asked of me right now. And so a lot of times, I think the best thing to do when you are trying to grow as an instructor is start with things you're actually good at. If you only understand how to smash half guard pass, that's okay. Just make sure that your students very much understand how to do it too, and make sure they understand it from your perspective. That is the biggest thing that I noticed between a good instructor and a bad instructor is bad instructors try to take everybody else's perspective and just repeat it back to you. And a lot of times it doesn't make a lot of clear and concise sense. A good instructor says, this is right now, this is how I think of this situation. Right now, this is how I try to win this situation. And then you can break down little details and you can break down all those other things. But it starts with your big ideas that you're actually thinking when you are rolling, okay? So focus more on stuff that you actually know, that you actually understand. And I know that you think, but this high-level black belt teaches all this other stuff, and I'm only a purple belt. Look, I wrestled with this when I started teaching jiu-jitsu. And something that people love to comment on when it comes to the show is they're like, man, I love how well-spoken you are. I love how much you know what you know. I know you know your content. Even when I'll do question and answer at the end of this episode. Maybe it'll probably be at the part 2 of this episode. But I don't have any notes written down on the questions, but when I read the questions, I can think of exactly how I feel about the situation. Now I think about the situation, and it is because I don't just quote to my students and I don't just quote to you guys what other coaches think. I'll say, hey, this coach's thought helped my perspective, but I'm not going to quote word for word what that coach thinks, right? Because it just tweaked my perspective a little bit. I am going to share my perspective with you because that is the only thing that I actually have of value to you. That is the only thing that I can give to you that is different. If I start on this show trying to quote the people that I consider the best coaches in the world all the time, all it's going to do is make you go, yeah, Josh doesn't really know his stuff. What's Josh's opinion, right? So if you're trying to be a better instructor, real quick note on it, make sure you're teaching what you do. Then focus on understanding what you do. Focus on getting better at what you do. Don't just quote what you saw in instructional, and definitely do not just quote word for word how you were taught the move, because maybe you're doing half guard smash or smash half guard passing and you start to notice, wow, when I do this move, I don't do it step by step like my coach taught me. Teach it that way. So often we love to do this thing in jiu-jitsu. We say, hey, because it was taught to me this way, you will now understand it this way. And it just doesn't work like that, in my opinion. Now let's look at what if you're trying to become a better motivator. So a motivator, I think in jiu-jitsu, and I see this, I really look at my friend Junior Silva. I've talked about him all the time on the show. And to me, that is the role that he just checks a huge box of. I will say this. A lot of times motivators have a lot of passion. And there have been times at tournaments that I've had to sit Junior down. And I've had to say, Junior, you're not allowed in the Midwest, in America's jiu-jitsu, you're not allowed to tell a student that you will kill them if they get swept again, especially mid-match. You're not allowed to do that. And then same tournament, I had to then sit him down and say, hey, you're really not allowed to, after the match, pull your student aside and reiterate, look, I will kill you if you fall over like that again. You're really not allowed to do that. But he does it. And guess what? That guy never fell down again. That guy hasn't been, that was like 2.5 years ago. Dude hasn't been swept since then. Motivation works sometimes, right? I know with me, I look at some of the things that Junior said in the lead up to my last super fight. Something that I could tell he felt that I needed was that I wasn't being confident enough. And the reason I know that is because we would train our normal session on Friday, every single Friday, and no matter what happened on that Friday, Junior would walk up to me, he would look me in the eye, and he would say, Josh, you're the best. You're going to win this match. You're going to dominate this match. And he would do it to me every time, to a point where I just wouldn't even, he would just say it to me and I would just be like, yeah, yes, sir, I'm in. You're right. And to me, that is what a motivator does really well, is a motivator knows how to motivate the individual. And that is going to be part of coaching. It's going to be a really big part of coaching, is you are not just steering a ship, right? To some extent you are, right? To some extent, it is like a ship where you have a ton of people all working together, all going in the same direction. But when you have 100 plus, when you have 200 plus people, it becomes much harder to steer that ship. And I think the only way to really do that is to know your individuals, is to have individual conversations. That's something, again, that you will notice really great coaches do very well, is that they talk to their students. A big part of the next part of this episode is going to be how to talk to your students and how to have those conversations. But I just notice when I go to a certain gym and it's a good gym, the coach tends to know everybody's name, tends to ask about this guy's dog who just passed away, or this guy's wife who just left him, or this person's whatever, right? And they know everybody's situation and they care about everybody's situation, because as a motivator, and what we're going to talk about in a second, as a mentor, a lot of times one little conversation makes a massive difference, especially when it's to the individual. If I sit down my entire team and I go on some rant about something that I'm really specifically directing to one of my students, a lot of times it just falls on deaf ears, right? They're used to me rambling on about whatever, right? They're used to me talking about, oh, do this, think this way, train this way. This is your schedule that you should be following. They're used to all those things. So I think for me as a coach, I just started to really focus on, okay, what are these individuals and where are they trying to get to? And that is, as a motivator and as a mentor, I think that is that's like one of the most important roles as a coach. I was just talking to Chris Paynes. I told you guys that this episode would come out last week, and well, it didn't. My bad. I'm sorry. I was busy at Pan's motivating my students. Sue me, right? But I also kind of knew that this was going to be a two-parter. And so I figured I would release this episode that's mainly about coaching anyway, that me and Chris just did, and release it in between this two-part episode. So next Tuesday, it is coming out. But anyway, a big reveal from this episode, something that Chris said to me that I really, really liked. And he was talking about this book he was reading, and it was about coaching. And it was talking about where the term coach came from. And so we kind of looked at that like, okay, where did it come from? So it comes from this city in, I think, Germany. And it is called Coach. It's like KOC, but the town is called Coach. And what they specialized in was making like horse-drawn wagons, like what we would think of as a stagecoach, right? And so where that word came from was they were building something that could take you from where you were to where you wanted to be. And really, that is, as we looked at like the three roles of a coach, as an instructor, as a motivator, as a mentor, and there are other roles that you could probably tie in as a coach. But the main role as a coach, what kind of encompasses all of those things, is someone who takes you where you are now and can get you to where you want to be. And so that's not necessarily a phenomenal technique instructor. That's not necessarily even a world champion. Sometimes you think, well, if this guy won a world title, he knows how to win world titles, and he will help me do it. And yes, sometimes that is the case. But oftentimes, that guy won a world title because he had a great coach that knew how to get him there. And as the student, a lot of the times, you don't necessarily understand what is going on. You don't necessarily understand. You are more like, for me, my athletes are my athletes. Their job is to focus on being athletes. Their job is to continue to grow as athletes. And so that is what they focus on. They focus on making sure that they show up each night. They focus on making sure that they are engaged each night. My job is to make sure that I know where these guys are trying to end up. I know that my certain police officer students, that they're trying to instruct police officers. And I know that certain people are trying to lose weight on the mat, and certain people actually are trying to become Jiu Jitsu world champions on the mat. And as a coach, then my job is to say, well, what could we do as a team that would help us get to all those places, right? And for me, that is why the focus of skill development has become so much more important at my gym than the focus of me just showing techniques, me just showing, here's things that help me in specific situations. Because you guys, all you guys that I'm teaching, all you guys that are training at my gym, you plan on being in different situations than I've ever been. You plan on using jiu-jitsu differently than I've ever used it, teaching it differently than I've ever taught it. And so if I only give you one perspective and one lens and I say, this is all you should ever do is try to be like me, or I just focus on one group and I say, nah, I'm only focused on the competitors. I don't care about my guys that are trying to lose weight. I don't care about the other people at the gym. One, people see that. What you do as a coach, people are going to notice. And if you treat people less than because they're not a competitor or because they're a white belt or because they're whatever, what your students are going to do is they're going to do the exact same thing. They're going to think it's okay to treat people less than. But when you say, hey, my focus as the coach is to find a generalized approach enough, or for me, a skill development approach, a skill development focus that will get us all better at jiu-jitsu. Because if we're all better at jiu-jitsu, if you want to be a coach, if you want to be an instructor, if you want to be anything, if you want to just lose weight, being better at jiu-jitsu is going to help. It's going to keep you motivated. Makes it a lot easier to keep coming when you know that you're getting better, right? Obviously, competitors, that's their main objective, is to get better at jiu-jitsu. Instructors, their main objective is to get better at jiu-jitsu, because then, just like we looked at, you can break down what you know and what you understand and make it easier for other people to be able to do those same things. And so, wow, that was just point number one of this episode. So now let's look, even though we've been touching on it a lot, actually what we'll do is we'll go to a commercial break. But when we come back, we're going to at least look at the first part of how to become better as a coach. And you have my word, we're not going to do any coach shaming on this episode. I don't think we've done it yet, and we will continue to not do the coach shaming thing. That's something that always annoys me when I'm listening to other people and they're talking about coaching and they're talking about things like that. Is they're like dog other people. We'll talk about that in a second. Let's go ahead and let's take a commercial break. Are you a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu coach looking to level up your skills to take your teaching to the next level? Have you ever felt like something was missing from your perspective when it comes to learning or training Jiu-Jitsu? Well, we've got some great news for you. We're excited to promote the 3 Lenses ebook available for free at simplifyingjujitsu.com/3. This amazing resource can help coaches fill in the blanks for their perspective of teaching Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. In this ebook, you'll learn the 3 key lenses that coaches can use to better understand and teach Jiu-Jitsu to their students. These lenses include the scientific, the artistic, and the athletic lens. And what we do is explain how those things even apply to you, how to use them to your advantage, how to identify when a student learns from one of these lenses that maybe you do not teach in or you do not learn in. So if you are ready to take your coaching to the next level, download the 3 Lenses ebook today. Again, it's completely free. It's only available at simplifyingjujitsu.com/3. So don't miss this amazing opportunity to improve your coaching skills and make a bigger impact on your students. Don't forget, it is totally free. So thank you for tuning in, and we'll go ahead and bring it back to Josh to deliver some more jiu-jitsu knowledge to you. All right, guys, we are back from the commercial break. Hopefully Josh had something interesting to tell you guys, but most likely he did not. Let's go ahead and let's get in to how to become better as a coach. I think that is why people are kind of listening to this episode, is like, give me some actual simple things that I can start doing that will make me a better coach. And I have a few. And then, of course, a few warnings, a few things to avoid. But I think the thing that we're going to start with, this is some of the best advice that I think I've ever gotten. We went to one day, I was probably like only 18, but I went to this this men's conference thing. It was in St. Louis, and so it was very close to my house. And the manager of the St. Louis Cardinals at the time, Mike Matheny, was there. And I've referenced his book before, the Matheny Manifesto, and I think I'll make sure to link that, but I think that is one of my favorite competition mindset books that I've ever read. And he just approaches it from a very different perspective. It's more based on developing skills and performing the best you can that day, and then dealing with how you perform. And I think that I really think it makes a lot of sense what he talks about, what he thinks about in that book, but that's not really what we're going to focus on. We're going to focus on he had a really interesting story that he talked about when he spoke at this event. And so he was replacing one of the best managers in Cardinals history, Tony La Russa. And Tony La Russa is just coming off of a World Series, and they're going to now employ Mike Matheny. And Mike Matheny, he was a professional catcher. He was a really good baseball player, but he had never coached in the majors at all. The only coaching that Mike Matheny had done was one of his friends one day said, hey, we need a little league coach for all of our kids. You should do it. And he ended up doing it. That's what the Matheny Manifesto was this contract he made his parents sign. And it was how they were going to treat their kids and how they were going to treat the coaches. It was really a genius thing. But that being said, he didn't have coaching experience. And so he says he gets ready for day one. And he is going to basically show up. He's going to talk to Tony La Russa, and then he's just going to be the manager of, if you guys are from St. Louis, be the manager of the greatest MLB organization that there is. Period. No questions asked. And I know you're like, oh, well, I'm a Red Sox fan. The Red Sox are so much bigger. They're so much more known. Yeah, you know what? St. Louis Cardinals are from St. Louis. And their fan base is huge. They're from St. Louis. No one from St. Louis does anything. Nobody likes St. Louis people, okay? Or Midwesterners in general. And the Cardinals are as big as they are. And you know what? They were doing it back at a time. Now they spend Boston Red Sox money, but they were doing it at a time where they couldn't afford to spend Boston Red Sox money. And regardless, greatest team ever. Sorry, high horse, just need to fall off that. Anyway, back to, it's been a while since we won a World Series, guys. If we could get it together this year, I know I sound like a typical Cardinals fan, but this is our year, guys. You heard it first on the I Suck at Jiu Jitsu show, if you're a Cardinals fan. Anyway, back to what I was saying. He is going to take over a huge baseball organization as the manager, and he has no managerial experience. And he sits down. He says he has a notebook that is completely blank, and he is ready for all of the knowledge. And he sits down, and Tony La Russa looks across from him, and he says, okay, this is what I want you to do. I want you to learn something new every day. And so Mike Matheny writes it down. And he goes, okay, what else? And Tony La Russa looked at him and he says, I want you to learn something new every day. And Mike Matheny's like, okay, what do you mean? He says, I want you to learn something new every single day. And that was the only advice that one of the best managers of all time gave a brand new manager that had no experience. Maybe Tony La Russa just hated us and he was just trying to bury us in the future, and he was trying to cement his legacy as the best manager of all time. But I don't think that's what it is. And this is, now we'll kind of go to my experience as a coach, and of my experience as for a lot of people, their jiu-jitsu podcast coach. I think that is something that's interesting, is that not only am I a coach to my students, a lot of people that listen to me week in, week out kind of think of me as a coach. They kind of go, yeah, Josh is like my diet jiu-jitsu coach. He doesn't show me the moves, but he rants on about stuff and I learn stuff from it, right? And so as somebody who does that, who's always trying to teach people things, I would argue, and I love to have this argument with people, but I would argue that I tend to learn more and focus on learning more than almost anybody else that I know. And the reason I say that is because I notice when I stop learning, and I am just constantly spewing out information and spewing out ideas and things that I do on the podcast, things that I do in my gym, what starts to happen is that river of knowledge that I have starts to turn into a stream and it starts to dry up. It's one of those things that if I am not being fed with new ideas and new things to focus on and new things that spark my curiosity, the podcast starts sucking. My teaching on the mat starts sucking. And partially, I was just on BJJ mental models. I almost want to say that The episode might come out in between these two. We'll see. We'll see on the two-parter. But it's definitely coming out very soon. But that was something we talked about, was coaching. And that really, for me, it was mainly talked about designated winner on that episode. But, of course, you're going to have to talk about implementation, right? You're going to have to talk about coaching. And I think that like just being interested as a coach is very hard to do for a long period of time. And Steve Kwan from BJJ Mental Models, he quoted somebody else. I don't remember who it was. You'll have to listen to that episode to find out. But he quotes somebody else and he says, yeah, this guy says that the first person to get tired of something being taught is the coach, right? Because he already knows the knowledge. He starts to share it. And then, he shares it 5 nights in a row. And maybe everyone has only really hit 2 or 3 of those nights. But to that coach, everybody has heard it 5 times. And he's like so tired of saying it. And he's like, these guys are going to get bored. They feel like, and it's because the coach is bored. But it can be really frustrating. It can be really, really hard to do that. It's really hard to be stuck there. And to me, the best way to handle it is to do, if you're a coach, do exactly what you are doing right now. Right now, you are learning something new. Even if a lot of the stuff that I said, most likely it's stuff that you already know, it's stuff that you already understand, and maybe I'm just tweaking your perspective a little bit. But sometimes that's all you need. Sometimes that's all you need to get excited again. Sometimes that's all you need to get motivated again. I spent a lot of time with Chris Paynes over the last, I guess it would have been like a week and a half ago. And one of the big things that we talked about that I don't think we really did on our recording, that we really didn't talk about when we did our podcast episode, was how coaches tend to fall down rabbit holes. And I think that, like, for me as a coach, that's something that I will do, where I will go, when I first started Designated Winner, I was like, okay, this is the only training method that we are going to use. And I did it for a while. And then it got to a point where I go, no, there are other training methods we should use. We should be mixing these. This is a tool, right? But I don't think that I would have understood it as well, and I don't think it would have mattered as much. I could be wrong about this, but I don't think that I would have understood Designated Winner as much if I didn't go with the idea of, all right, I'm going to focus on this for the next year, right? That obsession allowed me to get so much out of it and allowed me to grow so much. But there comes a point when then you have to fall out of that obsession. You have to go to the next thing. And as coaches, it seems like so often coaches will find something that is very helpful and they put a lot of focus on it. And then they say, this is all that matters. This is all that I care about. And to me, that is where we start to fall into the growth and the fixed mindsets. We did a whole episode on this, and I'll make sure to link it. But I don't even remember what I called it. Something about mindset is the episode. But yeah, we just talked about the idea of a growth versus a fixed mindset. And fixed mindsets can really creep in when you start to study, when you start to understand, when you start to grow. You'll go, finally, I know everything. And for a coach, that is the worst mindset that you could have. If your mindset gets fixed, your students will too. My students, I know I sound so hippie when I say stuff like this, but my students literally teach me so many different things. I learn so many different things from my students. Now, I will tell you the other side of the coin. I was just locked in a house for PANS for like 6 days with a bunch of my blue belts and white belts. Well, I guess it was mainly just my blue belts, and there was a Watson martial arts white belt there, but we don't even worry about them. We always hate the Watson guys. Watson's my coach, if that doesn't make sense. But anyway, a bunch of blue belts and some white belts locked in a house with me. Terrible experience, worst experience of my life. Executive producer Bryce, the producer of the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show, was so selfish. One of the worst people I've ever met. And I just can't, if I wasn't desperate for a producer, I would probably kick him out of the gym, kick him off the team. But I'm desperate for a producer, so I just have to keep him. But with that being said, there are certain conversations that I had with that group that I was like, oh, that's a really good idea. I've never thought of it like that. Or just certain opinions that they had about maybe if we trained this way, or maybe if we made this night a little bit different. And honestly, that their perspective really was helpful. If I had a fixed mindset and that was what they knew, they wouldn't ask me that. They would be like, yeah, I'm not going to, Josh is going to keep things exactly the same forever. And, it's how they've always been and that's how they always will be, right? But if not, they kind of feel comfortable asking me questions. And of course, I am a black belt and a coach. If the question's stupid that they ask me, I'm going to mock them to the best ability that I have in front of everyone, and then try to encourage everyone to mock that person too. But that's just what jiu-jitsu coaches do. Right? That's just our job. But that is the importance of having a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. And we're going to look at, I guess we're pretty much out of time for this one. And we're going to go to a part 2 on this episode. We're going to start part 2 on, what if you're noticing that you or your students have a fixed or negative mindset to any part of jiu-jitsu. And then we have probably like 10 different questions. And these are more frequently asked questions, the things that I get from other coaches when I have conversations and stuff. And that's what we're going to focus on. And then we're going to we might even talk about me and another one of the TAC team black belts hitting on 75-year-old women in the hot tub at our Airbnb. We might talk about that too. We might keep that out, might keep it PG. But we will go ahead and see. And go ahead, Josh, take it away for the outro. And then I will see you guys in just a couple days on Tuesday for the Chris Payne's episode. And then see you guys, of course, next Thursday for the continuation of the ultimate guide to coaching jiu-jitsu. And that is the episode. I just want to thank you guys for checking this one out. Hopefully it was enjoyable for you. You liked listening to me ramble on, at least for the first half, about coaching and what a coach is and how they can start to get better as a coach. And then we're going to look next week at just really the importance of jiu-jitsu conversations for coaches and, with other coaches and with their students and in their gym, and just how that one little habit, that one little skill could just totally change everything in your jiu-jitsu school, in the environment, in the curriculum, in everything. And so that's what we're going to focus on next week. Before that, though, as I told you guys, this Tuesday, so in just 4 days, my episode with Chris Payne's comes out. That'll be episode 183. And again, it is also on coaching. So for the next week, if you wanted to get like 3.5 hours of really good jiu-jitsu content, what would happen is you could focus on it in a sense of like, I want to be a good coach. I want to up my coaching. You could spend 3.5 hours on it, and all with the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show. So be sure to like and subscribe if you have not. And that's all I have for you guys today. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode, and I hope today's episode helps you guys suck just a little bit less at jiu-jitsu. Have a great day, guys.